I'm really conflicted when it comes to the assisted dying bill. I've been really impressed by the backstory for Kim Leadbeater, the MP who's tabling the private members bill. Kim came into politics after the tragic murder of her sister, Jo Cox, and the whole family response to that murder has been one of compassion and kindness. I think if my sister had been killed, I wouldn't necessarily have responded with the same grace and dignity that their family has. They've been trying to build a foundation, the Jo Cox Foundation, which is sought to find common ground and rebuild social cohesion, because it was a far-right extremist that murdered Jo Cox on the street. And so seeing that dignity in response has just been breathtaking. I can see that it's compassion that's driving Kim Leadbeater in her work. She speaks a lot about the time that she spends with families that have gone through the most terrible circumstances, families that have watched loved ones die in incredibly painful ways. And I can see that compassion driving her. But the other word that comes up a lot when she's speaking is autonomy, that people ought to have the choice to make their own decisions about their own death, about their own body. And again, I'm someone that believes in autonomy. I believe, for example, that people should have freedom, that we shouldn't have people trafficking or modern day slavery, that people ought to have choices about how they live. I'm someone that's passionate about children in the care system being able to make decisions about their future, that they shouldn't just be moved around like chess pieces on a board. But I guess the frustration I have is that it's very black and white, isn't it? That you're either someone who's compassionate towards the family and you believe in autonomy, or you're seen to be opposing the bill and you're not mindful of that same compassion. And there's very little kind of common ground being sought between those that are for the assisted dying bill and those that are against it. I guess I'm someone who is against it, but I'm against it for compassionate reasons. I believe in human autonomy, but I also believe in social responsibility, that it's part of a government's job to protect the vulnerable. And the vulnerable in this case are people who are disabled, people who might be reaching the end of their lives, but how do you protect them from being coercively controlled to end their lives prematurely? How do you build a system that doesn't perversely incentivize government to be mean to people? For example, if someone is facing unimaginable suffering because there's not enough palliative care, it would be cheaper for the government to not put that palliative care in place and instead encourage people to end their lives, because the longer you stay in hospital, the longer you stay in care, the more expensive it is. So we've perversely incentivized the government not to protect citizens, but actually to harm them. And I know people are very worried about the slippery slope argument that some would say that our legislative system doesn't allow for that. But this is more about social permissioning. Once we allow the state to help people end their lives, to help people kill themselves, what's to stop us enlarging the scope of that after it's become more socially permissible? We've seen that in other areas of law, that suddenly something that was very tightly controlled then becomes socially acceptable to increase. And sadly, that's what's happened in many parts of the world, including Canada, where now it isn't people just at the end of their lives that are allowed to kill themselves. It's also people that are facing mental health challenges or disabilities. And so I think we can balance personal autonomy with social responsibility, and there can be some common ground here, but that's not the way the debate has gone. And it's one of the reasons I think that we should slow things down. I'm very supportive of the Royal Commission as an approach that might give us some more time, 5 hours to debate something that will change the way that our whole society works is worth it. There's no point rushing this. And instead, let's invest heavily in palliative care. Most of the people I know involved in that world tell me there is not enough support for palliative care. And so there are people unnecessarily suffering that with the right palliative support could be put out of that pain. So what do you think? How do we balance the responsibility of autonomy and social responsibility? Maybe we could have a longer conversation to allow us the time to do that. Thank you.